Going to start the committee of the whole meeting, and attendance is not required. However, please note that all members of council are present. Also joining us this evening is Mayor Safarian, City Administrator Joe Mazur, Clerk of Council Cassie Rawson, Law Director Melissa Papora, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Chief of Police Brandon Began, Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spangler, Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, and our Finance Director Nick Roman. Our first order of business this evening is persons and delegations. We have one person that is signed in. Mr. Peace, if you would please come up, state your name and address for the record, please.
Evening, Randy Peace, 3505 Brown and 934 Mallard, both. I come tonight just to kind of look for some clarification. I am one of the 6 people on Brown with the sewer project. It is completed and we've been getting some numbers. I'm in the process of selling the Brown Road house, which has fell through twice based on some of the numbers that came forward. We haven't got official notices yet. Is that correct? Paul, or yes.
Mr. President.
Mr. Roman.
So the final assessment is an ordinance that is on tonight's agenda, but there were past notices last March. Notices were sent out after the resolution of necessity explaining what the estimate was. And I think there was a time period in which you could object to that, how you were being assessed, not so much the project, but how you're being assessed. Those went out March 12th. I believe we had sent certified and they got letters back that they were signed and received.
Okay. So, but since that time, the project has changed in price, correct?
Yeah, when the costs came in, they were higher than what was estimated. The original contract with Taylor Excavating came in 30,000 over what was estimated. And then council's aware in December, we had the change order that closed out the project. It was for 20,000. That was because they had a unforeseen, I think you have mentioned that before in an email I saw from Mr. Salander, that there was a storm sewer that was in the way of the alignment, and that was a change order of 20,000.
That was some of the confusion that I was, me and my neighbors were wondering about. My neighbor spoke to you, I think. He said you were very pleasant. But a pipe that ran through 3 of our yards that you did not know was there.
That's correct. Do you understand that?
Is that our job to know it's there?
Well, so it's fair to ask that, but I can tell you when this project, if you recall, we needed an easement from every property owner because the project was outside the public right of way. Normally, if the project is within the right of way, you have a record of what's there. Usually there's utility companies with their pipelines, you call OOPS and they have records of everything. But once you go to the private side, which is the case here, you had to get a brand new sewer easement, which everyone granted because you knew you're being assessed for it. Everyone granted that, but you're in an area that nobody knows what's there other than what you call OOPS on. So if whoever, I think that storm sewer serves 3 properties, which I believe you're one of them.
Yes.
And I don't know who originally put in the pipe, but there was no record of a permit for that. And in a lot of cases, there's projects that occur on weekends that people do without a permit.
So Larry, my left neighbor, Shad on my right, both built in 79.
Okay.
And they've been there ever since.
Okay.
And then Sharon Flipiak prior to me, that I bought.
Okay.
Also, and none of them put it in. So that's been since 79.
Well, someone had to put it in at some point because all 3 of your sump pumps were tied into it. Someone had to install it. Well, there were pipelines from the homes tied into it, is all I know.
I just feel it kind of, on the homeowner that all of a sudden you have this job engineering that looks for stuff. And so the job started, I want to say, quote me if I'm wrong, 16 some. So it came back at 26,000 we're being assessed for, ballpark, which comes out to like $200 and some a month on top of our taxes. So these are retired people, and the people that are trying to buy my home are retired. and they're worried about it. So we also requested that you maybe change the length of the assessment from 10 to 15 or 20. And you said, well, you should have negotiated that.
Well, first of
I
all.
wasn't aware I
Hold
could
on, so-
negotiate.
So one thing, I had talked to Linda, your neighbor.
Correct.
I have talked to Steve Salander. I've talked to Steve Horniak. I've never talked to you directly.
Nope.
So to use the word negotiating, I never said that. I think if you're hearing it third person from your neighbor, what I said was, at the time the resolution of necessity was passed is the time frame in which you set that repayment period. So normally, if you're gonna, whatever time frame you set, whatever the time frame the city sets, you set at that time. It's usually not done at the final assessment, which is this ordinance. That's all. That's all I said. And it would be new territory to change that time period at this time. And I think the one thing you have to realize is, I know a lot of people go by what they pay each month. I understand that. But when you change the time frame of this over from 10 to 20 years, property owners will pay more in interest. In the end, if you're gonna pay this bill till the end, if you own 100-foot frontage, we calculated you would spend $8,000 more for that same assessment. So if you were to change that time frame, if you were to double it from what it is now, from 10 to 20, you will increase the assessment costs in the end. So if you're gonna pay it up front, yeah, no effect. If you're gonna sell the house, he's the buyer's gonna pay for it. You're not. That's different. But if you're gonna live in that house and you're gonna pay that assessment, if you vote to change or increase this, that property will pay more over that time period. So you're asking them to pay more. I get, we should feel for them, but if you go from 10 to 20, those property owners are gonna pay more.
About 15.
Well, you're gonna pay $8,000. You're gonna pay $8,000 more just from going from 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, I get it too, both sides. These elderly people that are speaking to me about buying my property are more worried about monthly.
Yeah.
That's it. They're retired.
I understand. Trust me, I was one of those people at one time in my life when I had no savings. I went by what was monthly, but when you go through a loan or a car loan and you realize what you pay over time in interest, if you think about it, if you change it, increase that time frame, they will pay more over the period of time. So in the long run, they will pay more. I think if I'm one of the property owners, I would want to have a say. If you're going to make a change now where I know I'm going to pay more, I would want to have a say in that if I was one of these property owners.
I agree. It's just, I guess the mystery pipe is more of all of us are,
Well,
what if you hit a gas pipe?
yeah, a lot of things can happen, and there could be negligence on the contractor where that would be on him. But a lot of times on every construction job, you run into unforeseen things that were unplanned for. And a lot of times we'll give a contingency in case there are change orders. But, for a pipeline that's there that, it's kind of like, if it's private, you don't know any better to mark what you own. But we did reach out to people and say, hey, if you have a sprinkler system or you have something, let us know. That is a part of that process. Well, this is private as well. That pipeline was private. It is serving as a drainage, as a storm sewer. Whether you knew it or not, it's there serving your property. And it's kind of like, well, I know you didn't know to mark it, but we don't know it's there either. And, when the city fronts the cost in these projects, just remember that's coming from the sewer revenues. That's all the other users of the system fronting that money. You do it to get more users so that your rates stay down. Okay, that's the purpose of that. But it's also not their fault to have marked it. So it's like, what do you do? In the end, you're coming up with all costs associated with that project, and that's a part of the assessment.
Is there any chance of an increase due to unforeseen circumstances?
What do you mean an increase?
Well, it already went up once. What I'm saying.
Oh, this is the final
It's done.
assessment. It's done.
Well, it's caving in. So Taylor's been back twice.
Yeah,
already.
there's a warranty that covers his work, and that if something else, now beyond his warranty, it's the city's to maintain forever. And that's the beauty to going from a septic system to a public sanitary sewer. Now it will be the city's responsibility.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Pease.
Mr. President?
Mr.
Thank
Wallenzeck.
you, Mr. President. In our packet for this item, the estimated footage was $223 per square foot. Now we're at $265.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're roughly $40 a square foot.
Yeah,
Or linear
and so
foot,
for a
linear
100-foot, yeah, 100-foot frontage, you're going from 22,000 to
Yeah,
26,000.
it's significant. It may seem small on paper, but
Well, it's
you
not
have-
small to me. It's a
Yeah.
big cost no matter
Yeah.
what. And you gotta remember, you're doing a sewer project probably at the worst time for inflation.
Yeah.
I mean, even the original bids came in high.
Yeah, I saw that the estimates are there, so I just wanted to point that out, that the estimates are in our packet today. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walmsley.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
and if I can, Mr. Roman and Mr. Pease, we spoke the other day, Randy had reached out to me, and you and I talked about that. You also talked about at the time that the original request and legislation went through for that, to change that to 20 years from 10 years now, you said basically kind of restarts that whole process. You have to go through the whole thing because it is affecting more than one property owner. And it's kind of undoing what's already been done and we're already completed with the project. Could you just walk
Ye-
through a little of
Yeah,
that
and so,
logic?
well, just like any legislation that this council passes, if you need to change something, you're amending it, all right? And so here you have a final assessment that establishes the final number. Once you know all the costs, that's where this legislation is on tonight's agenda. But prior to that was this resolution of necessity, which is kind of like the green light of the project, meaning we're going forward and it sets the conditions. This was done last March, okay? There was a public meeting prior to that. Randy, I don't know if you were at that, maybe you weren't. Were you at that meeting? Okay, so the point is you go over everything you possibly can and answer all questions that you can. But in the end, we establish that resolution of necessity. You go to bond counsel, you ask them what the current rate should be. That's set. And then we were going with 10 years and that was set as well. Now, if you go and try to amend that time frame now under this final assessment, you also have to amend that resolution of necessity, which was the green light. And what I mean by that is notices were sent once that legislation was passed saying, hey, you have so many days to object to how you're being, you can't object to the project, you can object to how you're being. So the question is, if you amend that resolution, do you have to re-go through the process of putting out that notices? I would think, no, you've already done that. We already know the number. It's done. I think if you had to do that, I think the people who are being assessed, the ones that are going to pay it over time will pay more if you change this time. If you increase the time frame, they will pay more. If I'm one of those people, I would want to have a say in that. All right. So how do you do that? Do you get a signed affidavit that they're okay with you changing it? Are they going to acknowledge that this is what's being asked of them? It'd be like, getting a car loan and the banker changes the time frame. Says, hey, I'm doing you a favor. I'm going to make your monthly payment lower. But over time, you're actually going to spend more. You'd object to that, likely, is all I'm saying. So it's just not as easy as you think at this time frame. The time to do it would have been the resolution of necessity. That's all.
All right, and based on what you're saying as well, it would almost need unanimous agreement and consent in order for that.
That's
to
my
really be
opinion.
doable at this time.
That is my opinion.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Rowan. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr.
Thank
Walmsley.
you, Mr. President. Going along with what you were just speaking with Councilman Horniak about, would we have to go back, when we apply for bond and go to bond counsel for this, do we have to supply them our terms when we do that on payback? If we would choose to change something, do we have to go all the way back to that and say, this is how we're paying it back? Or would we be stuck with the terms of the original agreement on that?
Mr. President, Mr. Wallenczak, it's a very good question. I don't know the official answer. I do know that when they do go to bond counsel, they say for a 10-year, what should be the current rate that we should use? And that's what was given at that time. Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case.
Yeah, that is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pauloff.
just to go back on that thought,
do you have to pay the exact amount or could you pay more against it? Or is that something that's set up in that condition?
Once it goes on the assessment, that interest will be charged no matter what. So you have 60 days from the time that if this passes, when this passes, you have 60 days from that time to make a payment on the owed amount. Whatever that owed amount balance is after you make a payment, that is going on the assessment, and that amount will be required to be paid no matter what. So if you went to pay it off early, you would still pay off that interest once those 60 days are passed.
So, okay, so after that, all payments, after that, you can put more on it to pay it off quicker?
No,
You could, prior to the 60 days, you could pay off more of it, and that interest will not be charged on anything that's paid ahead of those
Okay.
60 days.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. President.
Mr. Salander.
Thank you, Mr. President. So just so I'm making sure I'm understanding what I'm hearing anyway. So let's say it's 10,000 that it ends up at the end of the 60 days. The interest on that will be all put in there for in this case, 10 years or 20 years. And that dollar amount, that interest amount over that time period is going to stay the same whether you pay it off sooner or not. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Once we get to those 60 days, whatever that balance is, we'll have, and this is 5% interest. We'll have the 5% interest on it for the life of it, no matter
Okay.
what, that will have to be paid.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further, council? Hearing none, we'll get into our agenda for tonight. The first item on the agenda for discussion is item number 1 of 2025, being presented by Mayor Michael Safarian. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President and Council. My spiel every year on this is ordinance number 1 of the year, every year. And this does give our departmental heads the ability to conduct business and was it up to how many dollars? 50,000? $25,000, $25,000. And it is traditionally the first ordinance we pass each and every year.
Thank you. Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Wallenczak.
wait, I think I have to wait. I was gonna make a motion to move this already.
Nobody objects, that's good.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to move item number 1 of 2025 to next week's regular meeting agenda.
Second, Ms. Pauloff. We have a motion by Mr. Wallenczak, second by Ms. Pauloff, to move item 1 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none. Item number 1 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. Up next, next item on the agenda is for discussion is item 2 of 2025, being presented by the Mayor Michael Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. Mr. Roman?
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to purchase a chemical called liquid ferrous chloride for the wastewater treatment plant. In past years, our annual cost was lower, but due to the drought, they definitely had applied more of this chemical to the treatment process, and our costs were above the 25,000. So we are, because of that, and knowing that it's higher, you officially need an ordinance now, and we did go out and get quotes for this, and that's included in Exhibit A. And when you do the math, PVC Chemicals did provide the lowest and best cost for this purchase. So that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Roman, would you like to speak on item 3.2 at this time?
It's a little different, but I can. So that on item 3, it's also another chemical for the wastewater plant. This chemical we purchased in the past from the same supplier. They are the sole supplier of this Clarifox polymer, but the price in this case has not changed from last year. So again, it's just for, again, they had approval of the purchase. It's a dewatering, it's for dewatering sludge basically. So again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, anything on item number 2 of 2025? Hearing none. I would seek a motion for item 2 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Salander,
I'd like to make a motion to move item 2 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
thank you.
Second.
Second, Ms. Pauloff. We have a motion by Mr. Salander, a second by Ms. Pauloff to move item number 2 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 2 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. Anything further, Mr. Roman, on number 3, item 3 of 2025? Council, what's your pleasure on item 3 of 2025?
Mr. President,
Mr. Salander,
I'd like to make a motion to move item 3 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Second.
thank you. We have Mr. Salander made the motion, second by Ms. Pauloff, to move item 3 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 3 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. Our next item up is item number 4 of 2025, being presented by Michael J. Safarian, Public Service Director. Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to enter into what's called a right of entry agreement. It's with Louisville Title Company, and it's on behalf of the Chipotle property there on Navarre Avenue. This is a part of the Navarre Avenue safety improvements. I think all of you are aware that we've been acquiring easements for the project, but sometimes if you come across an issue where they are looking for some other item that requires time to get, yet they're not in objection to the easement itself, you can do what's called the right of entry. Allows the city to proceed with the project and actually construct the project, and then you continue negotiating for the easement. In this case, Chipotle has a driveway off of Harbor Drive, and when Harbor Drive was established, and they established the right of way, and this is, Mary, you probably know better than me as to when that happened, but I believe it was in the 80s, early 90s maybe. Well, before my time, but when that right of way was established, a corner of their driveway ended up on the property to the south of them and not in the right of way. They are asking us if we can clear that up for them, where we acquire right of way for their driveway to be in the public right of way. So there's a lot of work to that. We have to go to the south property owner, basically negotiate to obtain property for that driveway, and that may take us simply more time. So, but they're not an objection to our easement request, and that's why they're willing to do the right of entry agreement. We've done this before. We did it for Tim Hortons. We've done it for other entities for past projects. So that's basically it. That's the background. Eventually, I'll come to council and say, hey, you know, we want to acquire this right away to the south to cover this driveway, and I'll relate it back to this. So, but again, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council,
Mr. President.
Mr. Walmsley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Roman, when we did this right of entry agreement with Tim Hortons, when we did that project, putting the roadway in to the rear of their property, we also had some issues with Tim Hortons when it came to the end on the payment.
Yeah.
Do we anticipate the same type of situation here?
Well, in this case, you know, it's a lot smaller take. It's a really small easement. It's a temporary easement, actually. And they are, I mean, verbally, they're saying they have no objection to it. They just want our help on this right-of-way take. You could argue clearly the city didn't acquire enough right-of-way back from the 80s and 90s. So I understand that. So, you know, we've said, hey, we'll try to get this no matter what.
But we're not going to be taking away parking spaces from them.
No,
I mean,
no,
there-
it's none of that.
It's nothing like
nothing
Tim
to that
Hortons
degree.
situation. Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack.
Mr.
Mr.
President.
Warnick.
Yes, Mr. Roman, if I could, I'll say, kind of working through this piece, trying to gain the additional space easement for their benefit, which achieves what our ultimate goal is. Do we still land financially in approximately the same place we would have had we not had to do the special acquisition of the land? I mean, does this all work out the same as it would have without that issue
Well,
being in
y-
place?
So, Mr. President, Mr. Horniak, the cost of this easement is way less than acquiring that right away for that driveway off of Harbor Drive, okay? But to be fair to them, they're saying, hey, it's something we've asked for, just, we haven't gotten anywhere. Obviously, it was working out something with their neighboring property. We're being asked to kind of come in. But at the same time, you could argue that when the Harbor Drive right away was established, the city should have obtained the right away and they didn't. So, yeah, it may be a higher cost than the value of that easement.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, any additional questions?
Mr. President,
Ms.
Um,
Ackerman?
I don't know who I'll receive this letter from, regarding that. Sarah J. Martin Esquire and Katie L. Martin MFA regarding the property at 2915 Navarre Avenue. They're concerned that it's gonna impact their home. Has that been discussed? Is that gonna be affected? I'm just trying to get a visual of.
Yeah,
is-
so,
Is that home there?
so let me ask, so, Mr. President, Mrs. Ackerman, you know, that's a different property and it's a different situation. It's one of the properties that we had gone to for right-of-way easements, okay? And then in Martin's case, it was a matter of a U-turn. We call it a bulb out,
Mhm.
but it's getting where you widen the pavement at their curb basically to allow for a U-turn. We originally went to them, just like a lot of the other property owners, and requested an easement for that. And we took it to heart for what they certainly have concerns. They don't feel a traffic light is needed. They certainly, they felt unheard as to their wishes for the project overall, but we had several stakeholder meetings. We had a public meeting. We're very far down the path of doing that project. We'd received grant money. Clearly, it's needed to reduce accidents. So we understand their view, but to be fair to them, they were going to get that U-turn right in their front yard. So we basically moved it to the east to not be in their property. It's actually more right at a commercial property where they're going to benefit from the U-turn. So simply by moving it, removes the need of the easement altogether. So we really don't need an easement any longer from them. We just moved it further to the east, so it won't be in their front yard. That's the result of that meeting with them. They still may be bothered by the project overall and may not want it and feel unheard, but we no longer really need an easement because we moved it to the east.
Well, thank you. I just received it today,
Yeah.
late in the day, and so I wasn't sure.
But this is
Maybe
different. This is
something
at the
changed and
Chipotle
they-
property across the street. but-
Okay,
yeah.
well, so that helps me get a
Yeah.
idea of it because, yeah, obviously it's their home, and so I just wanted
Yeah,
to clarify that. Thank you.
Understood.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Council, any additional questions? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item number 4 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak,
I move to move item 4 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Second,
second by Ms. Pauloff. We have a motion by Mr. Horniak, second by Ms. Pauloff to move item 4 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 4 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. The next item on the agenda for discussion is item 5 of 2025, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began. Mr. Began.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to enter into an agreement with Owens Community College to join membership with their training consortium. The consortium will bring, the last time I checked, around just under 60 trainings that are local, either free or low cost. And the membership cost for the year is $950. We use this training every year. We send a lot of our officers to it, and it saves us quite a bit of money because we don't have to send people out of town and get them a hotel to get these trainings. So it's a very good thing.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I I will seek a motion to move item 5 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Ms. Paulo.
so moved.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salander. We have a motion by Ms. Paulo, second by Mr. Salander to move item 5 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none. Item 5 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. And the final item on the agenda for discussion is item 6 of 2025 being presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Finance Director Nick Roman. Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we talked about, this item is to levy special assessments for the improvement of the north side of Brown Road by installation of sanitary sewer. So back in March of 2024, we passed a resolution of necessity declaring that it was necessary to construct the sanitary sewer. We went out, bid the project, and the project has officially been completed, and we have the final cost. So if this is passed, it would finalize the project, and homeowners would have 60 days to make payments on the assessment. After that, it would be put on their property taxes over the next 10 years at an interest rate of 5%.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 6 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Ms. Paulo?
so moved.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salander. We have a motion by Ms. Paulo, second by Mr. Salander to move item 6 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 6 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. With all of the items on the agenda being considered, we will now move to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll let council know I had the pleasure of swearing in 5 new officers today. Have a real good feeling that they really look like they're ready to go and they're excited. And I think not only myself, but the police department, everybody here, this room was full. They had the family members, and it was a real nice ordeal. 10 o'clock this morning, and these folks are ready to hit the street. With that, I would conclude my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one quick update on the Sheets building. I know I reported out at some point that the update from them was that they were going to demolish the building in October, and then they pushed it back to December. We have reached out to them. We haven't heard anything back from them yet. So I'm hoping to have an answer back, and just to give everybody an update. There's no requirement for them to do anything, but I think it's just nice when people are anticipating a project happening that we get updates, and we try to get them out when we can. So, but again, there's no requirement for them to do anything different. Wanted to say congratulations to you, Mr. President, and thank you for everything that you've done for us, Mr. Horniak. It's been great. Last thing too, Frost Fest is February 8th, 2025. So I have a flyer here if anybody is planning on attending, how to do that and get a table or get seats for that. So that's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Ms. Pepora.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pepora. Mr. Roman.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Horniak.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Ms. Paulo.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Mr. Wallenczak.
No report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Ms. Ackerman.
Mr. President. For my standing committee, I thought I'll let Paul Drake do it again this year to observe World Wetland Day on Sunday, to make a motion for that later. World Wetland Day will be February 2nd of 2025. And to remind everybody, the biggest week in American birding will be May 9th through the 18th. So I hope the city's preparing for that and getting involved and appreciating the benefits of our opportunity to be involved in that. Not for my standing committee. I was hoping that someone would have addressed or given us an update on the status of the OEDF filings and what they've been asked to provide for the city. Does anyone have an update on that, or?
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
I am aware that the foundation did turn in some of the required information to Mr. Roman and a ledger of the activity that took place with our land purchase, and money from the land purchase and sales is, we believe we'll have by the end of this week. Is that true, Mr. Roman? And then as long as those numbers balance out, we'll be good.
Mr. Roman?
Yeah, Mr. President. Yeah, so I did talk to Mr. Pedro today. He did state that the CPA that does their financial statements, which they did turn in the financial statements. I think this, basically a bank reconciliation, I think will be more beneficial for us to see that the amounts in the account are correct. That he said that should be ready. He's hoping for tomorrow, but I think by the end of the week, we will absolutely have something from them.
Mr. Roman, is it accurate to say that you first sent him a letter, the OEDF, on September 17th, asking for those?
So that was for the financial statements that were required per the agreement. So that was part of, I've actually been asking for those for longer than that. I would go all the way back to March of 23 is what I would say was the first time I had asked for them. And they had finally gotten those to us 2 weeks ago now for the financial statements. We didn't ask for the transaction log up until more recently, once this became a bigger topic and we wanted to show that these accounts were correct, even though we do believe that they are. That was early December that we had originally asked for those.
I do have one thing to say to Mayor Safarian. I was very disappointed to see you disparage an Oregon citizen. I've heard of it from several sources, and I
did what?
I believe you owe Mr. Henning an apology for telling people that saying things alluding to any kind of mental state. I think you've been very rude to him, and I think you owe him an apology.
Brad, if you think I was rude to you, I apologize. I certainly wasn't. But Ms. Ackerman always comes out with something to try to make me look bad. That's her goal. I kind of get used to it. I take it for what it is, not much. And I'll leave it at that.
So, go ahead.
So I have not been made aware of any personal attacks that, no one's spoken them to me personally. Now, it was never my intention for the press to get involved after I made the statement regarding the OEDF a few weeks back, but I made a public statement, and that's my right as a citizen, and they picked it up and they reported based on what that statement was. Now with that, I have heard that some of the reporters were being told that I was mentally ill, which is slanderous. It doesn't consider the clarity of my reason. And what I'm further asking for, or was waiting for the appropriate time, is for an audit that would coincide with my right to be able to speak to a whistleblower policy. And you look at the 990 form for the 2023 tax returns, it states that the OEDF, it says very clearly, is there a whistleblower policy? And it says yes. I've still never received any, we've never been able to communicate this one-on-one so that it didn't turn into a press show or some kind of a drama. All along, I've asked for a behind multiple times. I'm not trying to play the he said, she said game. From the very beginning, on many different occasions in writing, have said, hey, I want to speak about this. I have issues. I do want to blow the whistle on things that we had even spoken about, Mayor, that people you said they were nervous about. There could be illegality there. I have additional information. I haven't just thrown that out there in a way that's making it public. I could just start rattling those things off, those sensitive things. I've not done that. I've come to this podium this the third time now and spoken very clearly about saying I have these things to speak to, especially regarding the town center properties. And, my request for a whistleblower meeting. And when I could say that there's retaliation in my firing for those requests. I'm not going to speculate. I just want a proper audit that would be able to allow me to make those comments according to the whistleblower policy so that the speculation wouldn't be left to the public eye.
Thank you, Mr. Henning.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
I want to try to address this very accurately and cautiously. Number one is money that goes into the Economic Development Foundation from the city in contributions, like our $100,000 contribution. Once we give that to them, what they do with it, they have to answer to. They no longer have to answer to us, other than if we're not happy with their what we figured we get for that service, we could quit doing business with them. As for the money that we want to be accountable for is that money that we gave for land purchase, land sales, and purchasing anything to do with the land and industrial development expenditures. When I originally talked to you, I thought there was more money in those accounts than it turns out there is. I was unaware how expensive some of the costs were of some of those expenditures we had. There was a real eye opener to me. And once I seen that, and it appeared Mr. Roman and I kind of did a little bit of addition and subtraction, and we're saying, these numbers are a whole lot closer than we thought they were. And now that we see more of, we don't have all the numbers, it does appear, unfortunately, I thought we were going to have a lot more money left. It turns out that, like I said, those expenditures were quite a bit of money. And it appears they're going to balance. And if those, and no, we're done. We're not going to get into discussion of.
No, I know, I just wanted, that's my point. It's not, there's more detail to it than just us to be having this back and forth here.
Mhm.
I was asking for a meeting so that things could be spoken to in a very precise manner and not speculation involved. That's just one part of the issue. There's other things I would like to be able to speak and communicate with the administration in private about that. Otherwise, they're going to get drawn out into the public realm. I'm giving you that courtesy multiple times, and I've not been given it in reciprocation. So, I mean, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, I know that it's convenient to be able to make some type of explanation in the public forum to try to resolve that, but that's not a resolution, and it will just continue on that way. I mean, yeah, we can all grandstand.
I don't like to grandstand.
Thank you,
I don't
Mr.
think I've
Mayor.
ever expressed that. But what I will do is we'll wait to see what these numbers say. And if the numbers add up, it's a done deal to us.
So is there a whistleblower policy? Are you familiar with that?
A what?
A whistleblower policy? Does the OEDF have a whistleblower policy?
I do not know.
So you don't know that, okay. So if they did, would I be entitled to it? Okay, that's the question. And a lot of these things have to do with what you don't know, and that is clearly evident to me as well. Like, I want to know the ordinance. I mean, we could go on for a while about this, like the ordinance where the money, that was in 2019. And if you wanted to look into the specifics of what was required of the OEDF, once that money was given to them, that 1.7 million, we could see if that was followed to the letter of the law. We could also say, what about when you give money, and where's in ordinance is the agreement where it's codified to say, these are the requirements for giving the $100,000. Does it require an operating budget? Does it require them to show that they have an established membership, that they're elected, they have a board of trustees in place so that they could be voting on an annual basis for their executive board? Is the trustee, is the secretary, is he keeping the books like he's supposed to? Is the treasurer, is he making those books available to the trustees at any time that they request them? Like the bylaws state, These are the things that I'm being forced to come up here and try to rattle off in an itemized way. Because you have not shown me the respect of having a meeting. And that's why this has to go on and on this way, so that the citizens have someone that's speaking to them in a way up for them, so that that entity is held accountable, because it's mystery. Ms. Ackerman's gone through this for years now, and I can understand her frustration and the disrespect that goes with it.
Mr. President,
Ms. Purpura.
if I could address one thing, Mr. Henning, as far as any policies or bylaws or anything that falls under the realm of the OEDF, it's appropriate for you to ask them to get that for you. That's not something within the realm of the city. It's not appropriate for us to have a private business's policies and procedures. You would need to request that from them, and they could better answer those questions. As the mayor had stated, what the city of Oregon has to make sure balances is the money that we are giving them to either buy or sell land and to deal with the costs associated with that. As long as those are balancing, that's what the city funds are for. Any other funds that are coming in from any other business owners or memberships, that is not within the realm of the city of Oregon. That's within the realm of the private foundation. And those are questions to be directed to them, not to the city.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Purpura.
Ms. Purpura, I would.
Ms. Ackerman.
I'm sorry. In their policies, in the 2023-990, it very specifically says, on section B of policies, 13, line 13, did the organization have a written whistleblower policy? They answered yes. That would be, I'm assuming Tim Pedro says is the person who possesses the organization's books and records. I stood here as a citizen in 2022 and addressed the majority of this council. Mr. Major, you were not here. You were not here yet, and Steve, obviously. And I raised questions then about OEDF and transparency, and when the millions of dollars leave here, then, how are we keeping track of them? And Mr. Beasley and Mr. Safarian just talked to each other the whole time I was addressing council. It's on video if you can go back and watch it. This has been an ongoing thing. And so when Mr. Henning was abruptly terminated, I asked again, where are the bylaws? No one has a copy of the bylaws. I'm still asking for a city charter. I've been here for a year. Updated city charter. I'm still asking for zoning maps to be updated. It says in the statement that's filed with the IRS that all of these things are given to all of the members and principal, trustees, key employees, directors, et cetera. We have 3 people here that represent the city of Oregon to OEDF. And I've had so many citizens say, wait a minute, that's taxpayer dollars, that 100,000, never mind the millions that go out for properties and that we're, trying to keep track of. If there's a dime of taxpayer dollar spent, a dime that comes out, we here, all of us here at this desk are responsible to let the citizens know that we know where the bylaws are. We know they're up to date. We know they've been ratified. We know that they're, what the policies are, because according to their 990, all the players involved with the OEDF have those things. If we don't, we need to be reexamining it and looking deeper. An audit is not a bad thing. An audit proves you're doing things right. Everything's kosher. We're all good. It's all cool. I think we owe it to the citizens. This is not a new topic. We've gone through 3 directors in 3 years, 4 years. So there needs to be an accounting. I mean, I've got the 990s back to 2017, 2018. So I know who filed them, who's responsible for them. And it's the same person at the bottom line that is responsible. And Mr. Pedro needs to come and answer. He needs to come and explain to us. We don't need to go to Mr. Pedro. He needs to come here and explain to us who are voting to give him the money. And I feel a deeper sense of responsibility. It eats at me that if we vote to give any entity, any tax dollars, and we're responsible for it. And I want to know where it is, when it comes back, where it goes while it's gone. It's the citizens' money. So I don't think it's acceptable for you to say that you don't have the bylaws, the current ratified bylaws of this entity that are dealing with so much of our money. And we've got millions and millions of dollars tied up in properties across this city through the OEDF. And it's so lax the way that it's being handled from their end, but I don't want that to fall on us. I don't want that to reflect on us. So I appreciate Nick and Joel's gone out and tried to get some accountability from the OEDF, but I don't think we give them the 100,000, and I think we freeze everything and until everything is cleared up and everyone has, we all can move forward feeling good about this relationship.
Mr. President, I'll
Mr.
start and Mr. Mazer will add something to, and that's why we haven't given him the $100,000. Once we get that final answer, we probably will. And no, we would not have an audit or not sanction an audit if we get the numbers. If we get the numbers and they add up, that is, we're accountable. The citizen, or once we make a contribution of the $100,000 for what we contract for, it at that time no longer is taxpayers' money. It becomes the foundation's money, and they operate underneath their rules and regulations. They have to answer to themselves and their board. And if we don't care for the services they render at that time, we could choose to quit doing business with them. But remember, we have the foundation is comprised of some of the most prominent businesses in the city of Oregon. And when you want to call them into question, that's your prerogative. I don't think it's a great idea as long as they're giving us what they're required to do. And we're holding them to that, as Mr. Roman got most of the information and hopes to get the rest of it this week. And if it adds up, we're good. You can, when Mr. Henning come up, said grandstand all you want. You like doing it a lot. And it's just something to try to make me look bad. I understand. That's your job.
If you've done
That's what
nothing
you
wrong, there's
focus
nothing
in
to
on.
look
That's
bad.
all you've done. That's all
Mr.
you've done.
Mazer.
Thank you, Mr. President. And you already hit on that note of the OEDF, just for everybody's sake, just remember that the OEDF is comprised of the business community and members of the business community. So if there's something called into question, I just wanted to just remind everybody who that is. There are very prominent members of this community that care about this community very much too. So I don't believe that there's anything that anybody is doing wrong. I think we do need to just take a deep breath, see what they come back with at the end of this week, and make sure, then we'll have some information to go off of. And that way, give everybody a chance to give everybody a chance to reconcile it on their own, like we've asked.
I would like to remind everyone that the OEDF is a 501c6, which is a charitable entity. And so they're held to a higher standard and higher accountability. And so I don't think we're out of the realm of reason to ask them to be above board in all areas as a charitable entity. Thank you.
Thank
I
you,
agree.
Ms.
It's just,
Ackerman.
that's a reason. Part of me getting up here, I don't want to continue to make these statements, but if the press calls, I'm not going to talk to them this time coming around, but I don't respect being called mentally ill if that took place, Mayor. I'm not mentally ill. Okay, well, I'm just letting you know that's what reporters have gone back and said that was stated.
Thank you, Mr.
That's
Henning.
troublesome.
Thank you. Mr. Sandlander.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing from my standing committee, not to beat a dead horse, but I believe that the only way to truly answer to anybody with faithfulness and honesty and to earn the respect back of the citizens who have paid into this and taxpayers is an audit. An audit is going to be the only answer to truly clarify. It's not saying you did something wrong, but it's saying we need to clarify. We're either going to find out everything's good and we're good to go. We're going to find out there's areas of concerns and we can correct those areas. But there is some accountability that, and Mr. Mayor, I'm greatly offended by your derogatory talking towards Councilwoman Ackerman as well as Mr. Henning. And just saying, oh, you're always out to just try to make me look bad. Come on, grow up, seriously. But
Enough.
we need to do an audit. An audit
Thank
needs
you,
to be
Mr.
done.
Salander. Mr.
Mr.
Drake.
President.
I've had a lot of phone calls regarding this issue, and it is somewhat confusing. I know the economic development separate, but however, the city gives them money. I guess my question is either to Nick or Melissa is if I go in front of Judge Kovacs and he says that I owe $200 before next Friday and I don't have the money, what are they going to do? I mean, it just seems like it's just hard for me to believe that it's taken this long to ask for the books. I mean, if I'm late on paying my taxes, the feds are down your throat. I mean, how long do you let it go? You said it was before September or whatever. Hell, it could go in a year or two from now. And you know, as time goes, people forget stuff. So like I said, it's a hot issue. A lot of people like beating me up about it. And I just tell them I'm doing the best I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. I have nothing from my standing committee. And if there is no further business before council, I will seek a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for adjournment.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Council, any objections? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.